intelligentsia of our communities in the Northwest Province, commanders and commissars of the indispensable, insoluble, indivisible, undefeatable front troopers of the mighty Afrika Mayibuye Movement, PCT members that are here, RCT members that are here, SCT members that are here. Uritiba jotle jogole mfa mudula stilo wa rona hore amogetseng ka mafoko a mofuto. All members of the PCT, I see the PT is here, the organizer is here. All of you comrades, we are humbled to be received by you this afternoon. Akitso alasiti si Afrika. Listen twana sabatwana bantwana tsatsi hasere. Sentwana sabatwana bantwana tsatsi hasere. Baba dithoto. Baba dithoto re retse sentle gane. Baba dithoto. Ke masimo aba baba botla. Kuza, unisitwana ba. Baba dithoto ke masimo aba baba botla. Setswana seo se tlhalosa gore baba itsibeletsa anya kitso. Baba itsibeletsa go oketsa seelo sa bone sa kitso. Ba ba itsimeletsang go akanya ba tla akanyediwa ke ba bangwe. Yaanong rona makomredi re le mokgatlo wa Afrika Mayibuye Movement, re mokgatlo wa maakanya mmogo. Ga re batle go tlogela le ha ile a le mongwe ko morago ka kitso ya efangeli ya politiki e re gatsang mo Afrika Borwa. Setso sa yone le seo sa yone. Re batla gore ha re tswa mo o mongwe le o mongwe wa rona a be a itse gore re batla go aga lesole la Afrika Mayibuye le le ntseng yang. Lesole la Afrika Mayibuye le le akanyang jang. Lesole la Afrika Mayibuye le le tlaisang naga kae. Ke mole mogolo wa kopano e ya rona ya gompieno. Yaanong pele ga ke tsena mo bodibeng jwa magala, ke batla go tsaya se sebaka go amogela badirakanna ko Politburo. Ke simolola ka Comrade Ngaka o e leng head ya mobilizing. Ke re ngonne welcome to the Northwest Province. Ke tle ka head of political education and publications, Comrade Molema Region. Welcome to the Northwest Province. Welcome to the province of J.D. Mars. Welcome to the province of Ahmed Katran. Welcome to the province of Umfukuzetiu. Welcome to the province of Moses Kotan. Welcome to the province of Maboitsat. Tumelo Mlangeni will take you through all the granular details of our political perspectives. My standing here is just to tease you with giving you the ideological character of this movement, so that when you listen to him, you are equipped with the tools of analysis to understand the issues he will be putting before us. What is the ideological character of the Afrika Mayibuye Movement? We are a Marxist-Leninist organization that subscribes to the principle or to the notion of Pan-Africanism, which we locate within the tradition of progressive internationalism, and we execute that through scientific socialism. Let's repeat that moment. I'm worried that some of you are not noting. We are a Marxist-Leninist organization that subscribes to the notion of Pan-Africanism, which we locate within the tradition of progressive internationalism, and we execute and prosecute this project through scientific socialism. Let us unpack those concepts. What is Marxism-Leninism in our view? Marxism-Leninism in our view, Comrade Chair, is the revolutionary fusion between the ideas of Karl Heinrich Marx, the German philosopher and economist, with the ideas of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, our most respected ideologue and revolutionary in Russia. When we fuse these ideas, what do they tell you? We will look at this fusion purely from the concept of class struggle, Comrade Kubel. Because when we have time, Comrade RS, we will return to other tools of analysis about dialectical and historical materialism. Today, I want to take you through Marxism-Leninism, just purely through class struggle. What does Marx say about class struggle? Marx says the class struggle is the engine of history. The class struggle is the engine of history. And he says that this is propelled by different economic interests. He then lifts this notion of the conflict that exists between the working class and the bourgeoisie in a capitalist mode of production. In this conflict, Karl Marx says, the bourgeoisie is exploiting the working class. And therefore, as this contradiction sharpens when history moves forward, you will find a situation where the working class, Marx predicts, will revolt against the bourgeoisie and ultimately take us towards a socialist state, which socialist state is a period of transformation from capitalism to communism. That's what Karl Marx is here. Now, what does Lenin say? Lenin says, you cannot arrive at a socialist state just through predictions. You need a catalyst that is deliberate, that must take you there. And therefore, as Lenin argues, you're going to need a vanguard part. That is why we formed the Afrika Mayibuye Movement. Because even if we say we want socialism, we need the kind of party that will take us there. What is the content of this vanguard party? Lenin argues. It is an organization that is consistent of professional revolutionaries that will be able to execute the project of assisting this working class, not to be preoccupied on a daily basis with their narrow class interests, what Lenin calls narrow trade unionism or trade union consciousness from the tweak history so that a party like the Vanguard one is formed to discipline the oppressed and the exploited, to understand the broader responsibility in society of overhauling a system which is a source of their exploitation. So Mayibuye is formed out of the ruins of that understanding. To say in South Africa today, the class struggle that pens itself will not resolve itself on its own. So we have formed a vanguard movement called the Afrika Mayibuye Movement, because we realize that those that have been pretending to be the vanguard parties do not have the discipline of a vanguard party. So we formed this movement, comrades, to execute the instructions of Lenin, of taking us through a catalyst towards socialism. And comes the Windows as Marxism, Leninism, ke nyalano ya dithuto tsa ga Lenin le Karl Marx. Karl Marx o tlhalosa gore go tlile go nna le kgotlhano ha ntse re le mo tlase ga bokapitale, e leng gore e tlile go re gorosa mo nakong ya gore ba ba gateletsweng ba e leng badiri ba gateletswe ke ba ba tshwereng dithoto, ba tlile gore re utlwile go ntse yaanong re fetola leng, re batla go ipona e le rona re tshwereng moruo wa lefatshe, gonne ba ba o dirisetsa gore gatelela. Yaanong Lenin o a tlatsa a go fitlhelela koo ga go ka ke gwa dependa fela mo dithapelong. Re tlile go tlhoka mokgatlho o maleba o tla re golosang koo. Mokgatlho o o le o re bitsang re it's a vanguard party o tla nnang le ditlabakelo tse e leng gore di tla re thusa re le bagateledi, re le batho ba ba gateletsweng badiri mo mmusong o wa bokapitale, gore re ipone re le batho ba ba ka ikgollang mo bogobeng jo bo tla re isang ko tsamaisong ya bosošale jo bo tla re golosang ko bokomonisi. Ke tshubukane ya ka eno ya Marxism Leninism ka Setswana. Yaanong a re tsene mo go e ya Pan-Africanism. What is Pan-Africanism? Pan-Africanism is a worldwide movement that pursues the agenda of African solidarity, African unity, and African self-reliance in the world, across the diaspora. The first precursors of Pan-Africanism that are known when history is written are cats like Martin Robinson Delaney, who started in the mid-1800s. Martin Robinson Delaney is the guy who conceptualized the notion from the chair, the Africa for the Africans. These things don't fall from heaven. Martin Robinson Delaney. About Beethoven, I named Marcus Garvey, the Guti boys. Marcus Garvey, purely what you call the Back to Africa movement. When it comes to the United States, as former states, but a movement across the diaspora, but the Back to Africa movement that contributed to the early conceptualization of Pan-Africanism. W. Du Bois, Abai Sela for Ata Kahore. Do you know what conference? W. Du Bois was known organizing the conferences of Pan-Africanism. Self-reliance. After the slave trade. Kwame Nkrumah and Haile Selassie eventually led two groups that shaped the traditional Pan-Africanism in the soil, in the continent. But unfortunately, along the way, there was a big debate in the continent in the late 1950s. What do we do to liberate this continent in earnest? Because clearly, the ghost of colonialism had attacked us. African countries were ran by those masters that had partitioned our continent in the 1863 Berlin Conference. So they were preoccupied with what tools do we use, learning from our previous teachings, Sabo Marcus Garvey or W.E.B. Du Bois. They then adopted this notion of Pan-Africanism to formulate the project of African liberation struggles, each taking the responsibility of starting in their own countries. And they came to the conclusion that among the many things that they need to do in order to execute this project, the Pan-Africanism, for African liberation, they must put together an organization of African unity. Now, as they were moving towards this organization, the African unity, comrades, they started to differ in their imaginations. Kwame Nkrumah found himself on the side of 7 countries as the president of Ghana. Haile Selassie found himself on the side of about 13 African countries, which were at the core of this debate about what type of African unity and what type of organization of African unity should we put in place. And history tells us that these groups were called the Casablanca and the Monrovia group. The Casablanca group, Yabo Kwame Nkrumah, in we want a radical posture in terms of the kind of African unity we want. We don't want to waste time with this thing here, the nation state and their sovereignty first. We want to go straight into one Africa as one country that would be able to champion the needs of Africans at the time. That project was cemented around the notion of building one African economy, one currency, and one military state in the continent. On the other side, Haile Selassie and his group were saying, no, you are too much in a rush. We want the type of African unity and organization of African unity that pursues what we call gradualism. History tells us that in 1963, when the OAU was formed, we ended up with a situation where the group led by Haile Selassie won the day. That is why the charter of the OAU, when you look at it, it recognized principally this notion of sovereignty, precisely because they felt that we needed to liberate the nation state first, and then we will arrive at the bigger project of the United States. Fast forward, as we look at the trials and tribulations of this continent, all of us can see that we have not arrived at a cohesive continent that is able to contest global power with other continents, precisely because African countries, based on this OAU charter, are not united. The West is infiltrating us in all sorts of ways. In fact, hence the notion of neo-colonialism. These former colonial masters are still running their former colonies from where they are. And that is a fact. Precisely because they want to continue to benefit from the minerals of this continent. So Barashapagan to divide and rule, co-op and disarm. So the model that was taken in 1963, in our view, is the Afrika Mayibuye Movement, delayed our rival and genuine liberation and self-determination of the continent. So when we say Afrika Mayibuye, we are saying let us return to Kwame, who says a cohesive continent must begin to pen itself. What is the benefit of our continent operating as one complete term? If you look at just a simple economic principle, the populations of countries today are beginning to determine how countries fare in the international political economy. Look at countries like India and China. They are waging a very strong battle to unseat the US of America. Among the key things that they are using is their numbers game. India is the most populous country in the world. It accounts for about 17.8% of the global economy. China, about 17.2% of the global economy. How shall we Africa? The most populous country in Africa is Nigeria. Not even 3% of the global population. That is why we are not a factor in the world. But if we are to combine the 54 African states and say use your common numbers to compete internationally, you'll be shocked what will come out of that. Economists tell us. Comrades, can you wait a bit in your papers? We'll continue. Economists tell us that when you have a continent like Africa uniting and using its numbers game like China is doing, your advantage firstly will be a large market, will be having the largest market, because African countries put together will give you about 19.8% of the global economy. Now put together that you have the largest global market, you've got the largest labor force, and importantly, you are able to produce on economies of scale. What does that tell you? It means all the investments come here because we've got the propensity to consume as Africa. You can produce anything you want innovatively internally within the African continent and sell it to yourself. What that means is that you have the capacity to conduct what economists call internal circulation. That is the importance of African countries coming together. The 54 of them. We Africa e phatlaletse. Ha re Afrika Mayibuye, re bua ka selo se mako. A re boele go kwame go. Re ithute gore ha re bereka re le ngata re le maAfrika. Re sa diwe go tse di sa tlhaloganya tse tsa di-xenophobia. Re ka thusana ya moruo wa rona. O kgona go thusa gore le rona re kgona go ikwalela mo lefatsheng. Ka gore ke dilo tse di diriwang ke China le India. Ke ba ha o shebella dinomoro ba tla go bolela. They are about to surpass the US. China, in the next 5 years, will be a global superpower. What does it use? It's numbers game. So, when we say Africa Mayibuye, that's what we're talking about. But we do not make the mistake of suggesting that as we do that, we must neglect our own internal affairs in the country. Because we believe charity must certainly begin to grow. So we're saying South Africa must be the model African country that will employ to show the others how this continent must grow. Let me now turn to the issue of scientific socialism. Our understanding of socialism, comrades, is not utopian, it's scientific. Those of you who have paid attention to the polemics will tell you that utopian socialism is the idealist model that hopes that things will happen on their own. Another scientific socialism characteristics. So as Afrika Mayibuye Movement, we are saying we are going to implement socialism with South African characteristics. What are these South African characteristics? We are saying there are many things that we have to take into account. But the key two things that we believe must not be missed as we prosecute our revolution towards socialism are two important variables. The first one is that we recognize that South Africa is primarily an agrarian society, a rural society. And therefore the kind of rural society we are in, when we trace back to our forebears, we realize that there was a very powerful model of governance that they used to use, which has been put in the back burner by the current neoliberal government of the ANC. Because they decided to mischaracterize traditional leadership. I personally remember that in the debate in Kempton Park in 1993, when there was a discussion around what type of local system we want during the negotiations that was coordinated by the current president of the ANC. There was a debate around how or not to include traditional leadership. And the ANC was pursuing an argument that says that there must not be, traditional leadership must not be given the center stage in terms of local governance. Because they mischaracterized traditional leadership as a sellout project. Under the understanding they are apartheid collaborators, which was total nonsense. Because we know that we can count those who sold out. But on this other hand, we can count those who were there in the liberation struggle. So that mischaracterization was entirely flawed. The guy is that face. The guy is so, what the ANC did in 1993 during the negotiations was to mischaracterize this notion of traditional leadership. Our constitution now, there's only one sentence that speaks about traditional leadership. As Afrika Mayibuye Movement, we are saying we need to return traditional leadership in the space of local governments. Why do we say that? We have studied the dynamics. We are alive to the fact that if you compare traditional leadership with the councillor system, these councillors know the term of office is just 5 years. And therefore, their sense of loyalty to our villages and townships is cockeyed. Our traditional leaders are loyal because they are born to the role. They know if they can betray the people in the villages, their ancestors are watching. Baba never said it's our time to eat. Keep on peeling Pamu. Papamula Basi. Then we don't laugh about the other. I don't wear them for my record. I didn't say. I don't wear them for my diswan. Really, to the Fore, but who are not going to never tell our local governance. Reality, Baba to the mystery. Buholo tala ka dinako tse le tsa bagolo ba rona ga gona go le bothata ba gore go santse go a go kgotla ka gore ba tla go aga sekolo motse o tle o no kopana go kgotla go te re tswaletseng khosi na ntsha kgomo a thusa gore ba ile gore ba ithaopi ba tla nna le sengwe sa go bugalega go tsena go motse go dirwa tiro e go dumelaneng ka yone go sena gore motho a re nnyaa nna sekolo se ga ke tsene go sone a itse gore ke sekolo se se tlo go tsenwa ke bana ba gago. But today you can't get a counselor who's able to mobilize our communities to do that. That is what we are talking about in Africa Mayibuye. Because we realize that this councillor system is based on a model that will never be able to sustain local governance on its own. So we want, as Afrika Mayibuye, the traditional system of governance in our local space to be given prominence so that our chiefs are able to retain our ability to bring development thusane le community because go khotla go a buiwa ka dikgang ga se kgosi it's an issue yes. We will infuse African democracy into the traditional leadership system under our government. That is our understanding of socialism. The second variable, comrades, is that we realize that 80% of South Africans are religious, whether you like it or not. So we do not pursue the kind of socialism that is mechanical, comrade Chairperson, that dismisses religion as an opium of the oppressed, without understanding that our people, in their majority, are found in religious spaces. So as Afrika Mayibuye, we are saying, we must go to the churches. We must go to the churches. That is the place where we will find our people. Mobilize them. Work with them. Understand their plight. And take them hand by hand towards the direction of socialism that we want. Our prosecution of scientific socialism. Socialism with South African characteristics. Comrades, having said all of those things, to put in perspective our understanding of our ideological characteristics, we have explained the notion of Marxism-Leninism, we've explained the notion of Pan-Africanism, we've explained our understanding of scientific socialism as Afrika Mayibuye. So we want to conclude by saying the value proposition of all these ideas that constitute our ideological character, the value utility of all these ideas is not for purposes of street credibility. The value proposition of these ideas is not for academic breaking. The value utility of these propositions, comrades, is about being able to take these ideas for revolutionary application to change the lives of our people. Because these are tried and tested tools of revolution. They have executed revolutions all over the world. You can call them with many names. Cuba, Nicaragua, Russia. They used, including China, this model to be able to arrive where they are. That is why China is about to become a superpower. Those who tell you for socialism is dead, I must have missed the funeral. China is about to become a superpower now, using that very model. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with us taking ourselves that socialism has a tab. Keep puso ya batho ka batho e tshwantseng le batho botlhe ka dinako tsotlhe go sena tlhoko. The value proposition of these ideas, as I'm saying, is for revolutionary application. That is why Amika Cabral, in 1965, makes the salient point. At the height of the anti-colonial struggle in Nicaragua, in Guinea-Bissau, he says, always bear in mind that the people are not fighting for these fancy ideas in your head. They are struggling to win material benefits. They want peace, and they want to guarantee a bright future for their children. Ardulang le meile mo ditlhaloganyong gore batho ga ba zabalazetse dipono tse dintle tse di mo ditlhaloganyong tsa lona. Ba batla moruo, ba batla kagiso, ba batla le isago e tla tokafatsang matshelo a bana ba bona. Yaanong makhomrade ga le ka tsa Amika Cabral la mme ya botlhoko le tla kgona go ikgola. Victory is certain